Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I have been at it a little bit of both today. And it is staying grounded. And, I used to depend on that job that puts the roof over my head to help pull me away from being in my head and to be able to pull myself into or away from something to give that topic a little bit of a rest. For me, I have varied interests, and so it's kind of neat the way when I feel I've gotten overloaded on one set of content, and I can always tell because I'll go into the content and I'll be out of it right away because it can't hold on to my attention because I'm all lessened out. You know what I mean? It's like punch drunk with the information that comes across my path. But oh boy, what great information. What great conversation. And what great opportunities for us to make great strides in our evolution. And today, it was a little bit of a revelation, but also at the same time, it was a kind of like a moment where I said, is it even possible that it could be that simple? Uh, Last night I was watching Jay Shetty interview with Selena Gomez and Benny Blanco. I think his name Benny Blanco. I don't know. Nice guy anyway, and they just got engaged. But he scored that interview, and that's a big one. In less than 24 hours, he got over 1 million views on that interview. And it wasn't necessarily such an interview more than it was a conversation. So it kind of leads me into a content that I took in this morning, went a total different route. And I was taking in a little bit of Lewis Howes. Now he's also somebody who likes to interview, and he actually has interviewed Jay Shetty many times, and it was actually one of those interviews that I was watching today. And one of the things that I really love about Lewis House is his growth, and his amazing questions that he asks, and it just comes off as so genuine in its interest. You know what I mean? He's just not asking questions to check off something in a box. He's actually asking important questions, whether it's relevant to him or relevant to a friend or family member, or just in general because he wants to share it with his audience, right? So today they were talking about money. So I'll kind of lead into the topic of this, right? Because I know I'm not supposed to say so, but admittedly, I am not good in that finance part or aspect of my life in any way. I'm actually quite bad at it. And I'm not going to say that, I just didn't get those lessons even though I didn't get those lessons. But again, it's in my choices and what catches my curiosity and asking those questions and finding the resources and the people to help me out in learning something so important, right? But being the wild child that I was, I took interest in other things, right? And, for each of us, we get to make those choices, but also lots of us are directed and trained in our choices. So, I have to appreciate that my dad left it to us kids in free choice to make some of these decisions. It freed him up to be able to live the life that he wanted to for himself, right? And just trusted, I guess, that his kids were going to make good decisions in the guidance, right? In those set of family structured rules and regulations and boundaries that, all family put together, and those traditions and in those epigenetics, that just gets passed down like turkey dinner every Christmas, and those mashed carrots and turnips, right? In my family. But in your family, you might not have even had turkey, let alone celebrate Christmas. And that's why I'm saying all these things in our environment and in our upbringings, right? In those traditions and those things that we think are important to us, we build characters out of that, right? And lots of these memories are good memories, and some of these memories are kind of stinker memories, but they all amalgamate to who we grow up to be, right? And so sometimes I wonder, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Could Cindy learn financing? Could she delve in and do research? Yes, she could. But do you see the excitement in my face? Right? I've gone beyond that. Maybe younger, I might have found interest because, I was just actually, I came across, I don't know what they call these, but when I was going to university, I had transferred from British Columbia to Manitoba. Transcript, that's what they called it. A transcript of my grades, and I was really, really surprised because I took a really good look at this yesterday and tonight too. I took another look at it. And yes, there's a lot of failures. I got a lot of D's, a lot of E's. I failed, surprisingly, social studies, and that is part of one of my passions, right? My passion for history, that I actually, in grade 11 and grade 12, I was failed in both. But look at this, you guys. My attendance, the first year in high school, I only missed one day of school. In my entire life, I have never missed a day of work. I've never missed a day of work in any job. I have always shown up. But in grade 9, I missed 23% of the school year. In the 10th grade, I missed 16% of the school year. Uh, Only because at that point I was able to come out of the academics a little bit and go into the arts, right? I was always creative. So I'm taking ceramics and I'm taking acting and drama, and right, I'm taking fun stuff. Or easy stuff just to get those passing grades, right? And a lot of that, like the family studies, like really, right? But these were easy courses to easy grades, and I swear, I I thought I failed that one. I really did. I've told the story many times of the right this woman who just, she did not like me, and I don't know why she didn't like me. Like, she picked on me like all the rest of the kids in the class, and you know I didn't come to class a lot of the time because of that. And she knew I didn't have an interest in her class. And she said to me, "Cindy, we're doing this assignment. If you pass this assignment, I will pass you, right? But you have to apply yourself and you have to do a good job." Otherwise, I'm just going to fail you, she says. You don't, right? You don't even deserve to get a pass, even passing, even doing this assignment that I'm going to give you. But I want to give you a chance, she said. Right. And looking back now, I don't necessarily think that she was a hag. I just thought maybe she didn't like me. And I can understand why she didn't. And I just showed up, right, on the days that there was going to be something fun going on or a good topic or something. But the assignment she gave me was it was in sexual education. She didn't care what aspect of sexual education, and she was an old crone, right? She was so nasty. So I decided that I was going to, because she was going to fail me anyway, right? She was going to fail me anyway. So I decided to do my assignment on sex and old people. And when I put my heart and soul into something, it's magnificent. It always is, right? When I didn't apply it myself at school, there were lots of reasons for that, right? And yes, that was in my choices that I didn't apply myself in school, but I don't think I was capable of paying attention, sitting still, absorbing anything because I was too busy in my hypervigilance, wait, watching for spitballs or waiting to see who was going to punch me up the side of the head or, right, pick on me or say something to me, or worse than anything is draw that attention to me where everybody is looking at me. And that was constant, right? I was an obese teenager, and I'm not even sure if I was obese, but that's what I was led to believe about myself, right? That's what I truly believed about myself, and eventually till it actually came true, and I ended up being 311 pounds, right? At one point, 311 pounds. That was a big girl that I was. But anyway, going back to this, I did this project, sex and old people, and it was just a kind of a pinch to her because she just drove me crazy in my last year of high school. And she was just right. She was going to be the reason that I didn't graduate high school because she was going to not pass me in the class. And what a shameful that for me to think that, right, family studies was going to be the course that did me in. It wasn't going to be science or social studies or English class, not even physical education, which I had to do straight to my last year in high school because I just couldn't do physical education either. It wasn't my thing. And in the end, I'm glad I dug my heels in on that, right? Because I think the weight that I was, that the stress on my body, on my soul, on my mind, the where I was in my life at that point, that I don't think it was a good thing to put me into a state of being physically fit. I did it by choice and I lost an incredible amount of weight a couple of years. But again, not being able to talk about the other issues, right? You put me on a diet, I'll stay on the diet. If you're going to support me, I'll be in, right? But not if I'm not sharing with you who is helping me to get that weight off, what's going on at home. It wasn't just what's going on at school. And the teachers could keep the kids from picking on me or right. And they did, but you couldn't stop the rest of it. And you couldn't understand why all that work that I put into myself that one year, that the very next year I went up to 19% absent. My last year in high school, 23% absent. I had uh, two fails in my last year in high schools. I failed social studies. My favorite subject in school, social studies. Well, drama was my favorite, but well, ceramics. But social studies, right? I can't believe I failed social studies 2 years in a row. And there's a very amazing story too that shows that it wasn't for the lack of having the interest in the course that I wasn't applying myself. That's what it was. I wasn't applying myself, right? Again, it was in my hypervigilance, but I'm very pleased, right? Because I really thought that I was a dum dum right from entering high school right to the very end. And even though I was never an A student or a B student, um, I did manage to bring in C's in science and in mathematics. And that shows me that there was something in me that was capable, right? If I had applied myself, like I said, if I put my mind to something, it just happens, right? Because I commit to myself, and once I commit, I'm in for the whole thing. And if I had committed myself, what could I have done with these grades? Now, when I came to Winnipeg and I needed this transcript in order to get into college, right? Um, Technically, I did not graduate because I was short uh, um, in my foods foods course. She failed me, and in my social studies, I was failed in that. The other ones that I didn't do well in, they passed me anyway. Kind of like pushing the kid that's not right on the ball when it comes to academics, just moving them forward, getting them graduated. I was a bad speller by the time I got out of high school. Thank goodness for Grammarly, right? But I was very pleased looking at this when it kind of boosted um my sense of I make mistakes, that I didn't see things properly, that maybe I was listening to too many people going dummy, or it makes me look back in those years, like, why did I miss so much in school? Like, why could I not be still in class? Why couldn't I absorb what the teachers were offering? Because, right, it's obvious if I was interested in the courses, because there are a few here. Like, there was one year I was getting A's and B's in my physical education, surprisingly, but I had a teacher that took a little bit of interest in me that year, you know. But for the most part, those C's, I'm quite content to recognize that I was a C girl, because I thought I was a big failure in school. I'm so glad I came across my transcript. Yeah, this is a I right. I'm so glad that I saved it. So I want to make sure that I put it in a good place for now. I'll just put it in my office drawer that I go through every couple of months and put everything away. But going back to Jay Shetty and Lewis Howe's interview today, they were talking about what's your money story? And going back to the beginning of the conversation in my admittance, that, I never had those lessons. We were feral children left to our own devise, and to make our own choices. And my dad had very good credit. I didn't know that because we were always broke, because my dad was a compulsive gambler, and we were moving, and we ate poor people's food, we shopped in second hands. I just assumed, right, that just we were just poor, and I didn't take care of myself. because the family as a whole, I don't think were taking care of everybody was just doing their own thing. My sisters were doing their own thing. My mom was doing her own thing. My dad was doing his own thing. Half the year, my dad wasn't even home. And on summer holidays, my mom was sending me up north to go hang with my aunt, right? So it's really interesting how we neglect ourselves sometimes and don't recognize what we truly need for ourselves just in our basic needs. My life might have been different. I might have had amazing credit. I might have owned a house now. I might have picked somebody. Well, I was going to say, I had the most amazing husband and he had a good job. He was with the Canadian Forces, right? But I never looked at it in that way of the roof over my head or to be able to not have to work and have credit cards and have a house and have all the toys and stuff. I married somebody that I truly loved, that I wanted to spend my life with, and whether he had a job or I had to support him, I didn't care because of that happiness and that joy that I had in my life because he was in it, right? But I'm wondering, right, if I was a little bit more independent. And I was always an independent, but how independent can you be when you don't have those kind of lessons in how to put a roof over your head, your finances, how to buy a house, how to keep good credit, right? How to manage credit cards, how to save for a vehicle, right? I was the queen of beaters. I was well into I think I was almost 40 before I got my first new vehicle, right? And I'm not driving right now, but we're working to it. And if I have to be a queen of beaters, I suspect that's where we'll start. But that's where we'll start, and we'll move up again, right? But anyway, going back to the money story, like I said, what is your money story? Like, what is it? And I went back into my childhood and went back and I recognized that, maybe I didn't get any lessons in the piggy bank or paying for my own purchases. And I had a job. I was working by 10 years old. So I was spending money, but that's what I was doing. I was spending money because of my dad's prognosis. He had congenital heart failure and he didn't expect to live very long. Prognosis was not good. So my father was living in the moment 100%. He was living his best life. But he had a wife and he had kids and he brought that family along with him. That was the choice that he made in that. And he may have been frivolous in not paying more attention to how the kids were doing. And he tried, right? We go for Sunday drives and you can't get out of the car when you're going for a Sunday drive. And he would just drill his knee. Our dad knew everything and what was going on. But we have to remember, right? My dad was gone so much of the year. My dad was a commercial fisherman and he'd take off for months at a time, 2 or 3 times a year. And then when he came home, he would drive cab at night, so we barely saw him, right? Because when he'd get up at night, he'd have his dinner and he'd go off to work. So it was, my dad's nature to have the most spectacular life that he possibly could have, right? And I'm not blaming my father in any way, but when you talk about what's your money story, my money story is my dad's living in the moment, right? Because My dad didn't think he had a future. So every penny he brought into the household, he blew it. And if there was anything extra, he'd gamble it to see if he could get another big windfall so we could go off and have more fun, right? So, we can say, well, I lacked in those. Okay, sure, I lacked in those. But those adventures that I had in my life, that time that I had with my father, and even though he was gone a lot of it, my dad was my lifesaver. He was my best friend. He was the one person in the world that I knew loved me. It was what was getting me through my adolescence 100%, right? I come from a dynamic family, but lots of us do. And then we grow up and we have these issues and we don't even think, why do we have these issues? Why is it we are the way we are, right? So there is no blame in that in any aspect. And lots of us, we want to say, we want to put the blame on somebody. We don't want to take the responsibility for ourselves, right? And yes, there could be circumstances that would make that a fertile place to build limiting beliefs and have coping mechanisms to help us deal with these things that, right, that beat us up a little bit or weaken us, because it does in the end weaken us, right? So it was a really, really good conversation, and it was a really good question. What's your money story? Why is it, if you're in that same situation of just barely putting a roof over your head and you'd like to do better, right? I hang with the entrepreneurs, right? I take my lessons from the entrepreneurs, and I am not representing very well in that aspect. But if we go back to what I was saying, I got different lessons. I got experiences. I had conversations. I had examples in my life, and in my hypervigilance, I couldn't help but pay attention. And even if those lessons didn't come to me, if they were never meant to come to me, and I don't think they ever would, right? But I was paying attention, obviously, because when it came across my path, right, I chomped on that good because I recognized it. And it had been so long, right? Since that was in my life. And so maybe I didn't get those lessons in finances, but I got lessons that served me and served my family nonetheless, right? Nonetheless. Um Talking about my family, right? We got family issues, and yet things seem to be settling down, right? In all aspects. It can't stay wired forever, right? But I just wish that we could just like deal with it all at once, and then it just ends at all, and then we can just go and then, right, get back to the regular way of living and being. But that doesn't seem to be the case, right? We're all going to have issues at different timings. And so it takes me now into another conversations that I stepped into. And this one was with what's his name? I always forget his name. Did I write it down? Greg Braden. It was a conversation with Greg Braden, and he was talking about um, that it wasn't competition that's going to help us move forward, but it's going to be cooperation. And then I thought about it right away, and I says, no, but that can't be true, because if you just take the example of when they were trying to create insulin, the vaccine, insulin for diabetes. You know, the Canadians were at it, but at the same time, it was a competition, and the French was looking for that same vaccine, right? And it was in that competition that the Canadians finally hit it first, right? And we found that insulin. Now, when I, as soon as I made that analogy, but I went, but, and I could have, I had a couple other ones, but that one, it clicked in my head. But I said, but what if there was cooperation rather than competition, right? Two brains joining forces, two different perspectives from two different countries. And we were talking about traditions and all that stuff affecting the way we feel, the way we think, and the way we believe, that we would be right in our cooperation. Maybe we wouldn't have found, it wasn't a vaccine for diabetes. Insulin was actually just a regulator to regulate the blood sugars, right? But maybe, right, in a collaboration, that maybe, right? I'm sure it's been a lot of decades since that they would have found it if it was possible. But what if in that collaboration, instead of competition, they just didn't find something to regulate the blood sugars, that they actually put their brains together and they came up with something that would wipe diabetes off the face of the earth altogether, right? There is an operation. I had that operation. Not for that, for diabetes, but I can't get diabetes because I had a gastric bypass. A guy Gastric bypass is for to help you lose weight. Remember I said I weighed 311 pounds, right? So I had a gastric bypass to help me lose the weight, but in order to have the gastric bypass, you have to have a duodenum, which is a bypass of the glands that um, digest sugar, that metabolizes sugar. So it makes it so you're absolutely, it's impossible for you to get diabetes by having this operation called a duodenum, which is the gastric bypass, right? That I had. So, but because I was using it for my weight loss and not for diabetes, they let me have the operation. But the same thing happens in that operation, that for the reason why in North America you cannot have the duodenum operation. You can have it in Europe and Asia, I think, but you can't have it in North America. It's because you get malabsorption. And the fact that you can't absorb vitamins and minerals properly, it doesn't make it a safe operation. So they eliminated the possibility of just giving up one problem to just take on a new problem that could probably do just as much damage, right? So I don't know why I was talking about that one, but yeah. I got into that conversation somehow. Okay, you guys, that's my single. Let's just grab a card. Just 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, and quick reflection, quick first perspective that comes to my mind on this word that we're going to pull now. And if you don't know, this is my deck, 54 powerful words. They're just a word. Sometimes they have a little saying underneath or a thought, but on the most part, whoopsie, grab two there. Did I grab three? I grabbed three. Oh my goodness. You know, do I have to put these together? No, because I like this word here that I'm putting back into the deck. Pivot. It is the season right now to make big changes in your life. And when I say pivot, I mean turn around and motor, not just turn around and wait, or turn around and take a look, or turn around and twiddle your thumbs. Like turn around and get to work on something brand new. It's in our choices, right? But the word we got for tonight, first perspective, is in that effort. And because I'm in the topic of creating the best human being I possibly can, I have been in the word effort in the past week or so because I want to make sure that I stay grounded. So it's in those house projects that I needed to get done. I didn't realize, in all honesty, that I was that depleted that I actually needed to decompress a little bit harder than what I was doing. So, in that appreciation and consideration to myself, I'm giving myself that time to flake out. I'm going to give them all week, all this week too. Tomorrow is outdoor day. I'm going outdoors. I don't know what I'm doing. If I'm filming, I'm jumping on a bus. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get outside for a little bit tomorrow. I got outside for a little bit today and it was really, really nice. Spring is here, you guys, and it's a great time, right? To put that effort into something new. If I'm going to put this word together with this, and I think I will now because they were stuck together, right? But this word pivot is bringing about change, immediate change, that you recognize that something in your life is not working in the moment, right? What does it say here? Pivot is simply a try again, right? Try again. Sometimes we just need a small adjustment. Sometimes we need a 45-degree turn. Sometimes we need that 90-degree sharp turn. And those are the ones that right? Those are the procrastinating ones. Those are the ones that, right? We weren't doing anything about it. And so we get a crank because we have to be in a certain place in our life in the moment because we know it. We always know it. We know when we have to bring change into our lives, but sometimes in that need to be comfortable, that need to feel safe, we procrastinate. I teased my sister today. I told her, I says, oh my goodness, we were talking about building a business with my brand and linking up her eBay channel, and right, we're going to go into business together as reseller. And my nephew's here and he's going, oh, that sounds so good, I'll set up your website, like this, right? And I says, yeah, but the problem is, right, we got Alice, and Alice is a procrastinator from hell, and none of this will work without Alice. 100%, right? But it isn't that effort, you guys. We have to make that choice because if we don't make that choice, we're going to get a 90-degree crank. And I've had so many of those in my life, and they're quite painful. It's why I gave my notice. Oh my goodness, right? Maybe I'll get a 45 kind of little curve this year. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then, right, we just step into something comfortable and something that's moving. And sometimes it's just in that start, right? It's just a matter of just starting on it. And I say it all the time. You just start and then it just rolls down the hill like a snowball, and it just picks up and you get bigger and you right, and it just goes faster, and it's always in the start for me. And like my sister, I said about my sister Alice being the procrastinator of the world, because she's pretty bad. It's hard to get my sister motivated. It really, really is. And she's got her mind to set of digging in her heels. There ain't moving her, right? She's her own boss. Me and my sisters, we're all amazing in our dynamic, independent, right? Strong, strong. Yeah, those are my sisters. That's my family. Okay, you guys. 2 words together today, right? Sometimes in our choices, we have to make a choice. We know we have to make our choice, but sometimes it's kicking ourselves in the butt. But you know what? I'd much rather give myself a little boot in the butt because I know where I would like to go. And I know quite often if I make that choice, I can go in that direction rather than getting that 90-degree crank that could be a 360 right back at the beginning where I started, or it could be 180, which is completely opposite to where you are. Maybe that's a good thing if things weren't going so well, right? But if things were going well, right? Do you really want a 180? No, you don't, right? So put in a little bit of effort, make some choices, and just get into it right away, right? That action comes just as fast as the thought does. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. I'm going to wash my face, call it an evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.